there, listener, and welcome to episode 202 of the Ski Podcast. Regular listeners might know that I've been in Scotland this week, and we'll have a full podcast all about that trip and more in episode 203. Today, however, is a special chat with Blair Aitken, who I spent a fantastic day with on Ben Lawes earlier this week. Now, regular listeners might recognise the name, as Blair was previously on the podcast in episode 173 when we discussed the film 10 in a Weekend, skiing the 10 highest mountains in the UK over a single weekend. Blair is a former alpine national ski champion who's been backcountry skiing in Scotland since the mid-90s. He's been promoting ski touring amongst British skiers well before it became as popular as it is now. And the courses he offers through his business, British Backcountry, book months in advance. I chatted to Blair about his early days in skiing, from training midweek at the dry ski slope in Hillend to racing on the NORAM circuit in Canada. We cover his time in Val d'Isère, running the New Gen Ski School, and exploring the backcountry of the Vanoise National Park. And finally, we look at what courses British Backcountry offer, plus his new book, Ski Touring in the Northern Cairngorms, which sold out almost as soon as it was published. It was a real pleasure to speak to Blair, someone who knows and understands Scottish backcountry so well that just after we spoke, we set off through the driving wind and rain to arrive at one of the most scenic pitches I've ever skied on, just as the sun came out and shined on us. Let's have a listen to my conversation with Blair Aitken, British backcountry expert. Great. So I'm currently sitting here in Hillend with Blair Aitken from British Backcountry. How are you going, Blair?
Great. It's rainy Hillend, isn't it?
It is rainy Hillend. We've got a little delay and then we're going to go up later and hopefully we're going to get that window in the weather. And I guess that's all a part of Scotland. I think listeners, might recognise you because you were on the show before when we were talking about that great short film that you did called 10 in a Weekend. What were they, the 10?
The 10 highest mountains in the UK, which is one of which we're going to try and ski today.
And you did all of them in a long weekend, didn't you?
A half day on the Friday and 2 full days Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, well, it was brilliant. That I really enjoyed talking to you, and the videos are amazing. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But we're with you today. You're going to be guiding us on Ben Lawes. We're going to look for some snow, do our best to track some down. Hopefully we'll get that gap in the weather. But, since you've been running British Backcountry, I wanted to talk to you about the kind of rise of ski touring and the type of clientele that you're getting, the effect of climate on skiing in Scotland in general. But I wondered if I could just start off by taking you back a bit. I think our paths may have crossed, back in the day when I was working for Natives and you were racing at university. And racing was quite a big part of your early skiing career. You were on the Scottish team, is that right?
Yeah, skied for the Scottish team for maybe 6 years. Started off in Scotland, mainly training in Cairngorm. And then we had a French-Canadian coach called Eric Prefontaine. And,
right.
We stayed with him out near Montreal. We did the East Coast, the sort of North American races.
That's called the NORAM series, is it?
Yeah, and I forget what the one below that is. We spent a lot of time doing FIS races.
Right.
On the East Coast, which is, it's a tough place to ski. Cold and icy.
Well, perfect then if you come from Scotland, yeah?
Good if you're a dry slope skier. Yeah.
And so where are you from in Scotland?
Haddington. Well, I'm from East Lothian, but I now live in Haddington, yeah.
Okay, but so when you were a kid, you were from that area. So were you skiing on Hillend at all?
Yeah, so not far from Hillend.
Yeah.
I used to be up Hillend most nights, actually. My parents would drop me off there.
Right, okay.
I was pretty keen on Hillend.
Because that is it's still the longest dry slope in the UK?
In the UK, yeah. I think there's probably other ones elsewhere that are longer. But it's definitely, I would be surprised if there's anywhere steeper than that for a dry ski slope. It's one of the few places where it's so convex, you can't see over onto the steeper pitch.
Right, but if you're skiing slalom, often one of the limiters on the dry slopes, like when I was at university and a very different level of skiing, some places we'd go and you'd have like half a dozen gates or 10 gates and then it'd be over. But if you're at Hillend, you could do some proper slalom training.
I forget how many we used to get. I think at a tight course, we're probably getting up to 30 gates or something. Yeah. So it was a good length. And there's some amazing skiing there. I've not been up for a while. I've lost track with the ski racing sort of scene in the UK. But certainly my last memory was watching Dave Ryding race there, which was just unbelievable. I've never seen somebody generate so much speed out of a plastic ski slope.
He learnt on Pendle dry ski slope, so he had that experience. And, actually, Had a chat with Dave a few weeks ago. He was out in Chamonix and I saw him there and interviewed him before that. And, he is definitely leading the way. But one of the things he talked about was the kind of skiers who'd gone before him, because, Alan Baxter is part of that team now. And I think Alan was maybe a bit older, but who were your contemporaries in racing around that time?
Noel Baxter was who I trained with. There wasn't anybody. Noel got the furthest ever. It was Gareth Traynor as well, who went to Salt Lake Olympics. And then, so I was looking up to, Alan was a bit older, and then Finlay Mickle, Emma Carrick-Anderson. Well, Shemi was racing, Shemi Alcott was racing when I was racing. She was younger than me, but, obviously she was so talented. She was one of the faster female racers.
A number of the names that you've mentioned there, I'm sure listeners will recognise. When you said Emma Carrick-Anderson, recent listeners will have heard my interview with Zak Carrick-Smith, her and Phil Smith's son, or one of their sons, who's recently picked up medals at the Youth Olympics. So that runs strong. Leslie McKenna I talked to a while ago.
Yeah, so I grew up knowing a lot of the skiers from Edinburgh on the dry ski slope, and of course there was this other scene, the Aviemore scene, who some very talented athletes from Aviemore. I think Aviemore has got the highest number of Olympians per head, or whatever it is for a town in the UK. So I had a caravan, my parents had a caravan on Glenmore campsite. We used to go up and ski Cairngorm every weekend, so that's where we came across the Baxters and the McKennas.
Right, so you're skiing midweek at Hillend, and then you're going up to Cairngorm at the weekends.
Yeah, parents kept me busy, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is something that you've got to do with young boys. From my experience, you've got to keep them really busy, run them like dogs a bit. But evidently you were doing so much skiing around that time. Yeah. How did your transition go from that? Because, you competed at a very high level, more than most people are ever going to reach. But you ended up moving to the Alps and working out there?
Yeah, so I had a friend called Alistair Rainback who was involved in starting up New Generation Ski School with Tom Saxland and Warren Hogben. And Ali was keen for me to work for him, and he was saying, just get through your Basie, come out and I'll sort you out of a job. So I raced through the Basie, did it in a couple of seasons, and got my carte professionnel and went out to Maribel, worked for New Generation, and then was offered the opportunity to restart New Generation in Val d'Isère. So spent 10 years out there. I was already interested in ski touring. We'd already been ski touring in sort of late 90s, early 2000s, sort of hike and ride stuff. And I think we got our first set of Fritchie binions, myself and our friends, maybe early 2000s. We were ski touring in Scotland. So I did a little bit in the Alps and just got more and more into that in the later years, using the lift system to access the various peaks around the Vanoise National Park. And it's a terrific place for access to Val d'Isère. And then that came to an end. Took it as far as I could, really, and we had our first child, so it was a difficult place to live. If you haven't got a lot of money, it's hard to... For sure.
So you met your wife over there in Val d'Isère?
No, we met studying journalism.
Right.
And she came with me. But the agreement was we were going to go backpacking and travelling the world in the summer, and then in the winter we would work in France. I was expecting it to just be a few years, and it ended up being 10 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely was time for me to compromise a bit more.
Val d'Isère is a tremendous place to spend a season, let alone 10. And I know that you mentioned, you got into ski touring then, you're exploring the Vanoise National Park. So what would be some of the routes or lift access areas that you'd look at there?
There was a guidebook called The Keys to Spasskilly, which... listed most of the best routes in the area. So I was working my way through that because I knew that I wasn't going to be staying there indefinitely. So ticked them off as best I could.
And were you staying in refuges overnight or these day excursions?
Just because of work, I wasn't able. We did use the refuges quite a lot. I had quite a few friends that I'd ski with out there, but often we would just be getting up very early. It'd be 3:00 in the morning. I have a memory of there was a time. Must have been after I'd finished working full time there. I went back and did some peak week, doing the holiday weeks, working for the ski school. So I was in Val d'Isère, and I remember we decided on our day off we were going to do the Grand Sassier, which is a beautiful sort of pyramid-shaped peak opposite Tignes. And you have to get up very, very early because it's a south-facing slope that we were skiing. So we were up at 3:00 in the morning, and I remember walking through Val d'Isère with my skis on my shoulder and everyone spilling out of the nightclubs, and all the guys saying, the lifts are shut, mate, you can't go skiing at the moment. I was like, yeah. It was such a contrast between what I was trying to do and what a lot of other people were coming to.
I know it took me there, actually. This is kind of like a sort of indication of the change of life, because, I've been that person going home at that time in the morning. But also when, more recently I've been into triathlons, and I remember going down to do a triathlon in Brighton. And they start pretty early because, you need closed roads for those things. And cycling down through town on my way to do this triathlon, as all of those people were like going home thinking, wow, how times have changed, haven't they? So on that occasion then, were you skinning up from the town? There was no lifts for that?
What did we do? No, I think I was going to meet somebody, and then we started just above the dam. And then, you skin up as far as you can, and this becomes very steep, and then it's ice and crampons, and you're trying to navigate your way up through, trying to find the right couloir in the middle of the night. It's just ridiculous stuff.
And those years that you were there, we're talking about 2000s into the 2010s, maybe something like that. Is that right?
I think I finished 2015.
Yeah. Did you see a change in Val d'Isere? Because I think like a lot of resorts have seen change, but Val d'Isere maybe.
I was oblivious to it, to be honest. I didn't stay in Val d'Isere. I went up there, and that's where I worked. I didn't really have much to do with it otherwise. I was terrible at sales, so somebody else did sales for me. I tended to do a half day in the morning on the hill, and I would do my admin in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But like a lot of businesses, I started off working a lot on the mountain, actually delivering the product with the ski lessons and guiding. And then in later years, it got big enough that I took a step back, and it became more of an office job. So a lot of the time was spent on the computer, which seems crazy. You think you're in this incredible place. I had a view of Mont Blanc from the window where I stayed, and I was doing admin.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience to a certain degree. I was working for tour operators when I was doing my seasons, of which I did 6. And, as I got kind of promoted and had more responsibility, I got to do less skiing. There's a huge amount of paperwork attached in my case. For example, when I was in Courchevel and we had, 300 guests a week, to try and do the accounts for all of that. It doesn't sound very exciting. You got a view of the mountains still, though, and you could go out from time to time. And so you came back to Scotland, to start off your family, and then you got the chance to re-explore Scotland as far as, touring and backcountry is concerned.
Yeah, I was aware that I was retrained as a primary school teacher, but I was aware that I still wanted to carry on doing what I was doing in some capacity, so tried to find ways of replicating it. Reached out to a lot of people that were interested in steep skiing, because that was the thing I was interested in at the time, and then I started looking at gully skiing. It was quite close to the sort of skiing I was doing in the Alps, and also it was a way of developing my mountaineering skills, because in Val d'Isere you can do a lot without ever needing to use an ice axe and crampons, without ever having to do rope work. It's not chamois, it's quite a different skill set. So I was very proficient on my skis, but I was lacking in the mountaineering skills, and those are skills that are necessary in Scotland and easy to develop in Scotland.
And so I've got 2 questions from that. Firstly, when you say gully skiing, that's not necessarily evident to most listeners what you might mean by that. What do you mean by that?
Skiing if you're spend time in the Alps.
But you're talking about going up those couloirs to come down them. That's why you need those mountaineering skills?
Yeah, and sometimes in from above as well. Because we've got such strong winds in Scotland, I mean, we need the wind because that brings the snow and it packs the upper mountains in, packs the corries in with snow. They're quite often corniced at the top, so sometimes you need to access them safely, you need to use a rope. Or yes, certainly if you're climbing up from below, you're going to need to be able to use ice axe.
And so how did you develop those skills then? You went on further courses because you're already a qualified instructor?
I didn't initially. I kind of taught myself, and from being out with friends and researching online, etc. But now that I'm doing this as well in the winter, it's my main source of income. In recent years, I've gone back and I've done my winter mountain leader. I did my snow sports mountain leader, which is a more appropriate qualification for working in Scotland than the BASI 4 with the European Mountain Security. The awards that we work off, ski instructors work off in the Alps. The European Mountain Security is limited in that it wouldn't cover you for poor visibility navigation, which we would need to have in Scotland. It's emergency use of a rope, emergency use of ice sets and crampons. It shouldn't be planned use of. And these are all things that when I go out with people, I plan to use them. Of course I do. It's part of the route. So I needed to go to sort of top up the remit of my awards.
Yeah. And when did British Backcountry start as a business then?
Oh, I'm not sure. Well, 2015 was when I finished in the Alps, and I think it was a year later I started taking people out. And it was all across the country. It was wherever the snow was good initially. A fair bit of work on Ben Lord. So that would have been, I'm guessing, 7 or 8 years ago.
And you doing that in conjunction with Gav Carruthers?
No, he was working for Glenmore Lodge. We were both school teachers, and it was like a sort of job on the side. Yeah, I I wanted Gav working for me, not working for somebody else. We grew up together, and he was excellent at what he did. And and I knew that he would be able to take the business a bit further than I could, because he's got a good business head on him.
Do you want to kind of give us more of an idea of, what you actually offer? I mean, I know, if anyone wanted to book, they've got to book a long way in advance, haven't they? But, what kind of courses are you doing?
So now we've got quite a lot of courses on the go at the moment. It did start off with single-day courses, because my thinking is in Scotland you can just so easily lose days to the weather, so it's better to just have one day at a time and be very flexible. But now we're doing 2-day courses, and we ran our first 5-day course last week or 2 weeks ago. But you can see, though, this week we've lost all the snow. In 2 days we've lost everything to the rain. So that's why we don't usually offer long courses, because there's a chance we have to cancel on somebody, and if you cancel 5 days, that's a big
thing. For sure. I mean, I went to Glencoe yesterday, and they showed me photos or images of what the hill was like on Wednesday of last week,
exactly.
And what it was like when I went Tuesday, so 6 days later, and it's completely different. I mean, it had a great covering, and then it's just gone. Unfortunately, that's a combination of the rain and the temperature. And I guess that maybe just leads us on to climate, because we were having a chat earlier about the impact of climate. I mean, we're all aware that the planet is warming, but you see that impacting on ski touring in Scotland and having an impact on the resorts in Scotland as well.
Yes. So, I mean, this season in particular, there has been some issues between ski tours and the operating ski centres. It's because of the pressure on, small areas of snow. People want to access the upper mountains, so they're getting forced to go to high starting points, which is normally a ski centre car park. And then what has been happening, unfortunately, is some ski tours have been going up the piste or have been going up a tow track that's just been groomed. It happens, it's worse even with hill walkers, when they walk up a pisted tow track and then it freezes at night, you can imagine. So what's happened is there's been a bit of dialogue between the ski centres and governing bodies and ski tourers, and Glenshee has now put in place ski touring routes that take you through away from the centre. And you can also, when the lifts are operating, you can buy a ski touring pass. Cairngorm have been fantastic this year as well. They've been very flexible with their ski touring pass. Before there had to be a lower lift running. And now you get a ski touring pass when the mid-mountains open or when the upper mountains open. So you can walk to the M1, which is part way up the mountain, and then use 2 lifts to get right up to the top, and then get away from the system very quickly.
I mean, that sort of flexibility, it strikes me it would be, really dogmatic to say, oh, well, we only want to have alpine skiers on the slope, when there are so many more ski tourers and people coming to ski touring the whole time. And, for example, you could look at a resort like Courchevel, which most people would perceive to be, it's a very expensive place to go, but you can buy a ski touring pass there. I was chatting to Ed Lee in one of the older episodes of the podcast, and told me that's how he accessed the mountain. And I can't remember the exact price, but it'd be around €20, and you can use that to get your uplift and then ski tour from there. Who is it who's introduced a specific touring pass just now then?
Oh, Glenshee and Cairngorm and Glencoe, I think. Yeah, they do. They offer uplift for ski tourers.
And how much are those passes then?
I'm not sure about Glenshee. Certainly Cairngorm's £11.
Yeah,
which is a bargain to skip the first climb, and it works for the ski centre as well, because it gets the tourers away from this lift area. So if we're on Cairngorm, it's because there's not enough snow to be running courses elsewhere, in which case it's going to be very marginal conditions, and we need to be able to get through the ski centre without going up pistes.
And it makes sense as well, I think, for the resorts to think about providing specific touring routes. If you look at the Alps, most resorts, have done that now, because there is that demand there, and obviously you need to have that snow to be able to provide it. But having those routes up there are going to make a difference. I mean, yesterday I ski toured in Glencoe, and I followed the tow lift, but the tow wasn't open, so there was no one else around, so it wasn't really an issue. But I can see how what you're saying is, in the future with unpredictable seasons, because sometimes these stats are off the top of my head, they are anecdotal. 1 in 4 years up here, fantastic snow. The other 3 years, maybe, you're scratching around, or it's less predictable, and that's when the kind of pressure points come.
Yeah, it feels like that now, yeah. Sort of 1 in 4, that feels about right. So we're due one next year.
Right, okay. And just, thinking about that climate side of things, another thing we were talking about earlier, I mean, you do a lot of your courses from the Cairngorms, and you mentioned to me that you're finding people, your clients, your customers, coming up from down south, but by the train, the Caledonian Sleeper, direct to the area. Yeah,
that's been fantastic this year to see so many people doing that. So taking the overnight train, arriving Saturday morning, straight up to the hill, 2 days of courses with us and then back down on the Sunday night. Pack a lot in.
Yeah, pack a lot in for sure. The reason for them taking the train, is it, I mean, there's a convenience aspect to it because you're covering a lot of ground while you're asleep. But is it also because people are thinking about their carbon footprint and trying to cut it down?
I think it's a bit of both. It's certainly, I mean, everybody's different, aren't they? We've had people that have just done it because it's a very easy way to get 2 days adventure and not miss any work. And we've had other people who've said they don't fly anymore, they don't drive anymore, so they can get a train up and a bus up and be at the hill. Going from London, for example, it does seem hard to justify when you're almost as close to the Alps as you are to the Highlands. Figure that one out. Must be not much in it time-wise as well. But I think it's the simplicity of it that people like.
I mean, I came up here on the Caledonian Sleeper. You hop on, you wake up. In my case, in Edinburgh, because we weren't going through to the Cairngorms, but it was very straightforward. And, I love those sleepers. I've done a couple in Europe down to Nice. They're not so good for the Alps. You can actually go to Briançon if you want to go to like Serre Chevalier or Sestriere or something. And there's a route down to Tarbes near the Pyrenees. But they are talking about reintroducing those night trains down towards Moutier and Bourg-Saint-Maurice. And that would be so good if they did. Because back in the day, I certainly took those as well. So that's really interesting. Earlier on, you showed me a copy of your book. Remind me the title of it.
The one that I've just sold is called Ski Touring the Northern Cairngorms. It was something that I'd been wanting other people to do for a long time, and there was lots of promise with various groups that had got together and said they were going to do the guidebook, but it never materialised. So yeah, in the autumn I just thought, people are asking for this, I'm going to make one. So I put it all together. I unfortunately had enough pictures from working in the Northern Cairngorms to photograph for every route. Yeah, got it out before Christmas thinking that maybe I'd sell a couple of hundred copies, and they sold out in a day.
They sold in a day?
The first 200 did. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And then I did another 800, so I did 1,000 copies in total, and they sold, well, the other 800 were another 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and they were gone. So yeah, what I'm thinking now is just take a bit of time and do something bigger, do the whole national park, the southern and northern Cairngorms. And it was looking good at the start of the season. I mean, the southern Cairngorms were loaded with snow, and I was thinking about all the different trips I could make, go out and get pictures, and then it melted. So I've got to wait now before I can finish that.
The images are, obviously really important as well, but you've got some excellent maps in that book as well.
Yeah, the maps have worked out really well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been using drones, so ideally I go out with other people and I take pictures of other people. But when you're doing a guidebook and you want to visit a mountain and ski a lot of different routes, you've got to move incredibly fast, and it's not always possible to have somebody moving at the same speed as you. So what I've started to do is I send the drone up and I'll ski a line, leave the drone in the sky, I'll ski a line, and then I'll bring the drone back to me. So it's like having a little mobile photographer with you. It's a good way of doing it.
Excellent. I love that footage. I've never quite gone as far as buying a drone. I don't know if I'd really get value for money out of it, but I can see how that would be perfect for what you're talking about there. And I know the book is, let's say out of print at the moment. There's only 1 or 2 copies left. But, where would people get that? From the British Backcountry website?
Yeah, there's as I say, I'm not going to be printing another print until I've got the finished book, because I want to do the whole of the Cairngorms, so that'll take me a bit of time, but we'll maybe toward the end of the season, but most likely it'll be next autumn, in time for Christmas.
And within that book, there are a lot of routes through the Cairngorms. Have you put them all in there? Have you got some of your own favourites that you don't want to share and let people know about?
Oh no, the good ones are all in there. Yeah. And there's it's a tricky one because the obvious stuff, the high stuff, it all has to go in. But when you get to that kind of mid-mountain level and you start to do the lower ones that you really like because, maybe they're near the trees or whatever, you've got to think about realistically how often is that going to be in condition. There are a couple in there which are a bit lower. I had a group out in Glencoe last month, terrific snow down to the valley floor, skinning through Scots pine trees, beautiful. And I looked across to the right to a route that was in my guidebook, and I saw this group coming down this, basically powder snow and heather, horrendous descent that I'd put in this guidebook, as a variant of another descent. And I sort of thought to myself, I really got to be careful what I put in, because I could mess somebody's day up here. They go off looking for this mythical line that is occasionally in condition, because I've skied it and it's been good, so I've got to rethink maybe the lower descents.
I guess that's always tricky when I have people on the podcast and we're talking about like hidden gems, and I often get feedback from listeners afterwards saying, stop telling people about these things, about these places. We like it here.
Or the hidden gem isn't ever in condition apart from once in 10 years.
Yeah. And I mean, would you be able to pick out like a personal favourite, one of your, go-to descents or ascents?
Yeah, I mean, working with groups. I mean, consistently, Ben McDowie, every single year, Ben McDowie's got good skiing on it, and there's a terrific descent that goes sort of east off Ben McDowie down towards Loughan, very long sort of alpine feel. So yeah,
You have to remind me where that is.
Ben McDowie's northern Cairngorms, so you get to it from the Cairngorm Ski Centre car park. It's a bit of a plod out there, but I've been doing a lot of work in that area, and I can do it in such a way that you do one ascent, and then you've got a kind of a ski and then a short ascent. It's just a really flowing route that I love guiding. I could give you all the names, but it wouldn't mean anything yet.
When the book comes back into print, they can do that. I mean, I can certainly say from the last 2 or 3 days that I've been up here, I was in Glencoe yesterday, and although the weather was overall, far from perfect, from time to time, the clouds parted and you have that view from Glencoe looking back down over Rannoch Moor. Yeah. And oh my God, it is just glorious. And that is just a little bit of the mountains that you got in Scotland. I mean, you've got such an amazing playground to work with here and be able to spend your time in it. And I guess the pleasure is like showing other people that as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. Certainly, we're working in the Cairngorms, which is somewhere I've become very familiar with. That is the number one thing for me, is meeting people and showing people what's possible in skis.
That's exactly what I hope we're going to do this afternoon. I keep looking out the window, it's getting brighter. It's getting brighter, so maybe we should get going. Hey, look, Blair, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing your time and, all of your knowledge. And I guess everyone else who's been able to go on your courses and read your book as well. And then, I'll report an update of how we get on this afternoon. Thanks very much. No problem. Well, I hope you enjoyed our chat as much as I did. As I mentioned at the top of the podcast, we did go out into some pretty shocking weather, but Blair knows what he's talking about, and it was definitely worth it all. You can find out more about that adventure in our next episode, but until then, I'd like to thank Blair for his time. And finally, listener, thank you for joining us, and until next time, goodbye.